council meeting with a prayer, but unfortunately the people that were allocated to come today have been unable to come, so we will just be commencing the meeting without the prayer. So we can take a seat. So I'll declare the council meeting open for Thursday the 28th of April. Welcome along everyone. So just a couple of things, councillors. We've got in the rear, sitting in the media benches, Joseph Outram, who is a Waikato Wintec, is it, journalist? Doing the journalist course. He's going to be taking some notes, may take a few photos as part of his course, so welcome along. And yeah, that's that. All right, apologies. So I've got two apologies, Councillor Green and Councillor Wilson, so I'll move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, against? Now, confirmation of the agenda. So first, councillors, you will have received the additional information that has been provided yesterday. So that includes the submissions for the fresh water document. It includes the variation of deed for Vibrant Hamilton Trust, and it includes the Founders Theatre consultation document. And in addition to that, another Founders Theatre consultation document will have been in front of you when you arrived to take your seat today. So those are the extra items. And then just further to that, just in terms of the PX or the confidential agenda, I just want to add one item to that before we confirm the agenda, and that is the item, the Chief Executive's review, to be taken in PX, and as I advised you, we will take that item immediately after afternoon tea, and simply because people have notified me that they may not be here at the end of the meeting. Ordinarily we've just added on to the end, so that is the additional item for the PX. So with that...
Excuse me, you referred to a difference. You have referred to this document being given today on our table and the one that was given last night. Are they identical?
I don't know. I myself also have got that in front of me. I don't know. I haven't read the one that's been put in front of me today.
The changes were as flagged in the memo covering last night's document. So the document that's been on the table today incorporates those changes that were flagged in the covering memo from last night's document, which we can talk through in detail, which was mainly the inclusion of a table.
So what was sent out last night at 5 o'clock?
Plus the memo reflects what has been tabled today.
Yep. So it has been changed?
Yes.
Have any of the other documents we've been given been changed today that we were given last night with that same email?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mallett? Councillor Mallett, did you have a...
So will we be going into pink, then public, then back into pink, will we?
Yes, that may be the case, depending on timing, but just for practical reasons, I think that's the best way to do it, really. Okay, so with those, I'll move the agenda and confirm it, and the Deputy Mayor is seconding that. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you. Declarations of interest? None. Thank you. Right, public forum. We have one speaker in the public forum, Margaret Heller from the Citizens Advice Bureau. She's a volunteer there, and she wishes to talk to us about item 10. Welcome along, Margaret.
Thank you.
You've got 3 minutes to tell us what you would like us to hear. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Honour, members of the Council. Firstly, as Citizens Advice, we'd like to thank the Hamilton City Council for the generous support of many years by providing us with rental premises and annual funding. We are a community service manned by volunteers. During the past year, 13,000 inquiries have been recorded where human, empathetic and intelligent options or solutions have been provided. This service is undergirded by continuous ongoing monthly training sessions, which all active members are expected to attend, thus maintaining a national standard. This service is free for public, free of charge. All documented data is sent to Wellington and processed, determining policy for social services nationally. We are the first point of call recommended to new migrants, visitors, transits, locals, and often outside the area through our national 0800 network. CAB has occupied 55 Victoria Street since 1992. Our statistics prove that this is the best location. We work in the cathedral, with the cathedral, for space management on training and meeting days. Good free parking for volunteers. 3 people per duty 3 times a day is parking that's needed. For our organisation to function efficiently, we need enough space to accommodate all activities in one place, a position within the CBD accessible by foot, bus and car, visible and easy access for the public. 55 Victoria allows us easy access for the police and PAR referrals. Comfort and privacy for face-to-face interviews. Please let us continue our community occupancy of 55 Victoria Street, asks our chairperson, Jeanette Holborn. It has character and an interesting history. We will take good care of it for you, and it ticks all the boxes for us. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Margaret, for that very helpful information. Any questions for Margaret?
Does anybody want the paper?
No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, there are no other speakers in the public forum. Councillors, just before we get into the agenda proper, I just need to let you know that they have been trialling the voting buttons because, as you will recall, they haven't been working very well, and they're hoping that they're going to work today. So on your behalf, I have again asked the Chief Executive to make sure that remember how we worked on a sort of a project about how we could bring ourselves into the 21st century, probably the 20th century to start with, and then the 21st century, so that we had a system that worked well. And he's promised to go and find where that has got lost in the system and bring it to us. When, Richard?
2027.
2027.
I'm inspired by the Victorians, so I'll see how it goes.
So I'm just premising that because we did have a lot of problems with it last time, and hopefully it's working okay this time. Item 5 are the council minutes, page 5. So I'll move that those minutes be accepted. They're for the meeting of the 31st of March, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any questions or queries on those? No, I'll put all those in favour. Any against? Carried, thank you. Item 6, Founders Theatre, Future Options Engagement Report, page 13. Welcome along, Sean. 2 Seans.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think what might be helpful, one of the Seans, is to just explain the difference between what was received last night and what has been left for us today. If you could just do that, thanks.
Yep, certainly. So the key difference is on the so this document here, the inside cover. There is 2 tables here which outline usage figures. They have been in addition since last night. Yep. And there have been some minor typo changes which are not significant, full stops and commas and things like that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so are there any matters you want to address in your report first?
I guess if we can take the report as read, and you've got the document that we've mentioned. Yep. Just in terms of the engagement process, there's just a few matters which have been updated since we last spoke to Council at the briefing, so I just wanted to cover those off.
Right, thank you.
So the distribution of the engagement document is to be through City News to residents in Hamilton. In addition, the document will be distributed to households in Matamata, Piako, Waipa and Waikato districts, and that'll be by post. That engagement document will also be available online and through the municipal building. And people are invited to respond through Have Your Say. There's an online survey. People can make written submissions, and there are verbal submissions with a hearing scheduled for the 13th of June. In addition, Creative Waikato are running focus groups. The Arts Forum Advisory Panel are also being consulted. and just the independent research, just an update on that, a company has been commissioned to conduct a telephone survey that will be 1,000 residents in Hamilton and 600 residents in the wider Waikato region. So again, the wider Waikato region has been broadened to include Matamata-Piako, Waipa and Waikato district. And there have obviously been some changes to the engagement document itself since the briefing. I can go through the changes in the engagement document. So based on the feedback from the briefing, a number of changes have been made, and I think this document now reflects those. The bullets in the fact box have been pared back. The front page now includes text which references the maintenance of founders and that it has been maintained appropriately. There was a question raised in the briefing around whether the option 2 refurbishment was off the table if the earthquake report came back and identified that earthquake strengthening needed to happen. I just want to clarify that the original $13.8 million, which was being budgeted for founders, was to replace the flying system. The additional $6 million, so making up that $20 million option for refurbishment, that $6 million is to address earthquake strengthening issues. So the refurbishment option at $20 million is feasible. There are a number of sort of design changes which have been incorporated, as well as some copy changes to more clearly articulate the issues with founders and to try and more succinctly outline what those 3 options are. There was a question raised about funding, and so some copy has been added around what the options will cost and how they will be funded. And what we have included in the document is text to the effect that council is likely to be funded by borrowing, but council would obviously consider other funding options. And we've also got a question in the survey which tries to explore how the public feel about that. And there was a final a change around just clarifying some wording around the way that people can give feedback, including the verbal submissions, which we have updated. And just in terms of the content, or the look and feel of the document, we have taken a number of the photos out, which was feedback from that briefing. In doing so, we've tried to reduce some of the content as well. So now what you have is a 4-page engagement document. This will be the same size as the City News, and by going to a 4-page document, we're able to produce that as a wrap, which goes on the outside of City News, which we think will give it greater prominence and better public engagement. So I take questions.
Right, questions. Councillor Mallett?
Thank you, Sean. And thanks for adding some more information about the costs. You're talking about the debt here. Clearly there will be an impact on rates as well. You haven't kind of identified that?
No, we haven't, and this was discussed a lot. The reason being that funding options haven't been confirmed, so we're unable to say what the impact on rates would be until a decision on funding has been made.
Okay. So when you say funding impacts, you're meaning possible third-party funders?
Potentially.
Okay. So you could go out and say, okay, on the basis that worst comes to worst, we fund the whole thing. This will have an impact every year on the operating loss of the theatre, plus its depreciation, plus its financing costs. We'll add, Claudelands is sort of 6.5% of rates. What would this be?
So we haven't done the detailed workings on that, and so with respect, we did consider a number of ways to try and present the costs to people reading this document. In the end, we've decided that the numbers 20 million, 50 million, it's probably the easiest way for people to understand the magnitude of difference. Yeah. And talking about things like debt to revenue ratio and those kinds of things probably be.
I appreciate that's a
More
little bit
confusing than
esoteric
anything.
for a lot of people, but,
Could I add one, sorry, after you finish, Councillor Mayor, I'd like to add one point, please.
Pardon?
Oh, after you finish.
Okay, so that's a bit sort of esoteric for a lot of people, I suppose, but people do understand the impact on their rates, and it's you got to be very careful when you go out to public consultation, when all you're giving them is the cream and not giving them the veggies. Everyone will say, yeah, do it again, and it's debt, and debt never gets repaid and rolled over to the next generation, sort of carry on. But I think we need to be very honest with people and say the impact of this is, A, we can't do this project, or B, the 3.8% is going to be 4.5% or something like that, annual rate increase. Whatever it is, I'm not saying that is what it is, but...
I understand the point.
So you're saying you just don't have you haven't got accuracy of information to say that, is that?
Well, we don't have, it's not the accuracy, it's probably more around that we don't have certainty around how it will be funded, and therefore it's very hard to elicit all the various options.
But you could put you could put in there, as I said at the start, a worst case scenario, we get no funding from the lotteries, no funding from the government, no funding from our local, regional partners.
Yep.
The worst case is that your rates would go up by an average of 1% a year. I've got no idea what the figure will be, but
We've adopted an approach similar to what we have with the 10-year plan summary, with the consultation document when we talked about bringing things forward or bringing things back. Remember we had the option one, which was the 10-year plan as it stood. Then there was the questions we asked about doing things sooner and increasing debt. We held the rates constant, and what we assumed was rates was constant, and effectively what it impacted on was the balanced budget, pushing it in and out. But ultimately what it impacted on is when did we hit that debt to revenue target. And so we've followed the same premise here.
when we hit the target, you drop things off.
Or basically we push it in. We didn't drop things off. We said, do you want to push it in or push it out, Councillor Miller? So what was holding the rates constant, so at 3.8%, assume that generates a certain cash flow, but it's got a bigger debt burden to try and cut down, which then pushes the debt to revenue ratio in or out. The same premise on this one. So, and that's one of the questions that came through from the briefing, is to what extent have we relayed, and I agree with you, not all the members of the public understand the debt to revenue ratio. It's something we live in every day, and members of the public don't. To what extent we bring that through. We thought it's better to actually have it on the website because we actually had some language to it, but whether or not it actually adds any value in here as well.
But I think that's the question that's being raised, and I think the feedback was that it was important for the public to understand the consequences of decisions under these options and what that might do to those numbers, given that we have consistently put those graphs and those numbers in our financial information every time we put something out.
Some of the feedback.
I thought the feedback was in the March meeting to include that, but when we were here in the council meeting in March.
And I totally understand what Richard said, and it's a totally rational way to do it. But my understanding is, and I wasn't here when this decision was made, but when you first came in, you had the 8% increase, then we had a 10 years of 3.8.
That's correct.
Well, that 10 years now has become 13 years, hasn't it? Because it's for the next 10 years, we're still doing it. So, for a lot of people thought, okay, 8%, then 3.8, 3.8, 3.8. But at the end of 10 years, it's going to be, the sun will start shining again and the rates won't go up so much. But all we've done is chucked it out another 3 years with the 3.8.
Well, I think just focusing back on this document, because we're focusing on the content here, we're not debating the financial strategy.
But my point is that people don't, unless you tell people, they would not understand that this will have an impact of the 3.8s continuing on for another so many years.
Well, I think too, Richard, in the report in March, we did have those graphs, so I'm not sure.
So in the report to council,
we did.
We include the graphs, I believe. I guess the difference being that this is not a report to council, this is an engagement document for consumption by the general public. We didn't feel that those graphs would, I guess, add to people's understanding of the three options.
Right.
If that,
Okay. Councillor McPherson?
Is this just here as a draft for us to go over, or do we have the ability to change it?
Well, I think it's being presented today in this report for approval, as you will see in the resolution, approval, so that it can then, the consultation period can begin
but if it's not approved or people want to make changes, that can be done. I'm checking.
Yes,
Because
yes.
the questions that have been raised by both yourself and Councillor Mallett are important, because I think that if the consequences are not an increase in rates above the amount expected, then there's something else, and the something else at least needs to be canvassed in here, if not in pictorial form, in as easily as accessible as possible form.
Yep. And
so that was, can that be done? I guess following up the Mayor's point just before.
So I think what this is giving rise to is there's a few queries here about content, right? So, Councillor, you had your hand up. Do you have some?
Sorry, I had that. Was,
oh, some more? Yep,
yeah,
go. Keep going.
There's more.
Yeah, it gets better, Gary. Look, in option 2, the discussion is that a new theatre would be located near the Waikato River, perhaps in the arts precinct, that we've called the south end of Victoria Street. So the consequences of that I immediately think about are parking issues. Is there any inclusion within the 50 million for enhanced parking availability there?
No, there's not. The 50 million that's been estimated is purely for the build of a brand new building.
Okay, so we wouldn't give resource consent to a major public facility the public would use anywhere else unless parking provisions were fully encompassed within such a resource consent application. We know we've got rules relating to that. So every other development I've seen in the central city addresses parking, how it's going to be handled, whether it's going to be the 2 basement floors, and therefore cost of that.
Councillor McPherson, your point is what in relation to that information is not in here?
Yeah, so my point is that this is an unrealistic figure of 50 million. If that's the cost just for the performing arts aspect, the cost is incorrect, because it will have to, one way or another, include a cost related to parking. I've no idea what that cost would be. So can that be done, and it should be done, and can it be done before this goes out?
it's actually a really good point. Sean?
Yes, look, we can certainly get an estimate done to see what the impact is. The challenge we have is we did put a pricing together for a build, but that build wasn't predetermining the sort of likely location and where it might be. Is it on flat ground? Is it on sloping ground, and so forth? So it's a very good point you raise.
Yeah, may I add that it doesn't really matter where it is. Obviously, there are greater geotech potential problems on the riverbank, but in any event, the proposition is that it's somewhere new. If it's so, with option A and founders, you've got parking arrangements in place, so there's not a new requirement. Option B, wherever it is, you're going to have some costly parking arrangements.
Can I just clarify option? Sorry, that the build a new theatre, one of the options is on the existing site. So that is the 50 million option. But taking your point that if it was on a different site, then yes.
And the preference expressed here is certainly for a different site and perhaps in the arts precinct sites. I think that needs to be identified when you're doing that sort of information out to the public.
Okay.
So thanks. No, I think that's been covered by your earlier discussion.
All right.
Gary's.
Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Worship. Just a few questions on the survey numbers. You've covered off the 55,000. That goes to people who get what's going as a wrap for City News. So that includes residents and ratepayers. So correct. I mean, everyone uses the theatre. On the bottom of page 14, under the target audience for the survey, you've got representation selection of 1,000 residents in Hamilton and 400 from across the region, but that's actually 600, you're saying?
When the report was originally written, it was 400, and we've since increased it to 600 to get a better margin of error.
Now, you've got a comment there that says that the sample size provides an acceptable margin of error rating. What is that margin of error? What's the acceptable number?
So for overall, the margin of error of 2.5%.
2.5%.
So if we split that out, so if we split out for the 1,000 people, 1,000 respondents in Hamilton, For Hamilton specifically, that would be a margin of error of 3.1%. And for the 600 people in the Greater Waikato region, that's a margin of error for them specifically of 4%.
Okay.
And then combined, it's 2.5%.
And just remind me, a margin of error doesn't include things like people not answering their phone, people not wanting to participate.
So the sample, the 1,000 and the 600, that's people who actually respond.
So, okay, so if it takes 2,000 phone calls, you want, that's because that was my follow-up
We'll have
question.
1,600
We will
surveys.
get 16, the views of 1,600 people.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And just, I guess, if I can, Your Worship, I haven't had a good look at the second one that we've just been given, but I do have some concerns around, I'll say for comment perhaps, but around design and look and feel, given that this is, and I'm hearing some members around the table talking about, you know, maybe we need to be a bit bold with figures. I think we need to be pretty bold with figures. I think we should be including the price tags right beside the options, and it's just, this is really significant community engagement that we need, probably the most significant engagement we're going to have this decade. So this document's right, and I'm not, on the face of it, it looks very council, like a council document, and I don't know that we're going to get the right engagement. So I'm not happy at this stage with this discussion document, but you know, I'll wait to hear what my colleagues say.
So just on that, so your concerns more about design or content?
A little bit of content, but design as well. I think there's an awful lot of information in there. It does look like a council document. I don't know that we're going to get an average person that doesn't engage with council a lot. You know, we get serial people that submit on everything, and that's of great value to us. But this is different, this is significant, and it's a big community facility and a massive decision for this council. I don't think that this document, the way that it looks, feels, and some of its content is up to scratch.
Okay.
But happy to hear what my colleagues think.
Right. Councillor Gallagher, you got some
Yeah, I
comments?
certainly concur with respect to the design, but the two issues, when you talk about the new theatre would cost approximately $50 million, what's the, and this is public information going out, and I've seen a statement today from someone else that sort of contradicts it. What's the basis of that figure?
We, through the chair, we asked for advice from our sort of consulting architects and engineers who have been working on the Founders project with us, and they came up with a figure of between 48 and 52 million. They also had that supported by a number of other theatre rebuilds and renovation work that's gone through recently. However, once again, I will stress that it is just based on the build of the theatre and the requirements of a new theatre in a similar vein to the current composition of Founders Theatre. So it wasn't predicated on a lot more space, it wasn't predicated on a bigger auditorium, and certainly it was just based on the build of the building. So back to Councillor McPherson's point, it didn't take into account any specific aspects of a new location if a new location were to be in the frame at all. So not included.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we should be far more cautious in that figure. I'd have it much wider than much more looser term than approximately, I suggest. The other thing is, as we know, under Founders, we've got the engineers going there for the seismic review, and there's a possibility, and it is only a possibility, one would assume that in fact the seismic may be a whole lot more complex than we think. And I'm just trying to think with the option one, if we were to highlight, because the option one could technically become hypothetical, and later in the debate I'll be wanting to explore how much information we'll have by June, because this is trying to encourage an informed response. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, this was raised at the last council meeting as an issue, and that we won't have the engineers' reports until around the end of June, And please be assured that I am pushing to have that brought forward if we can. But you are right, there is that possibility. We have a fairly strong sense of where the result will come in at, which is where the estimate from the engineers and the architects came from for that additional 6 million that Sean Hickey referred to earlier. But you are right, if the report came in and suggested there was far more than we anticipate, that does certainly have a bearing on it.
Yeah, I wonder if perhaps bold or something there could be, you know, and I know people can then, you can do websites and web links so people can go into more detail around this report or that, but this is just, if you like, an introductory pamphlet, I get that, but it might be, I just leave that as a thought and something I'll pursue later. Then the other issue, which of course is my favourite, and this is about the funding, and this is expected to be funded mostly by council borrowing, picked up Councillor Mallett's points before. However, we'd also explore other options. I would argue on both the option 1 and option 2, whether in the, you know, to what degree in the introductory pamphlet would you actually give an example of another option?
Look, we have alluded in the discussion document, we have alluded to alternative sources of funding or partnered sources of funding, but it's very difficult for us to make any sort of indicative statements along those lines because it needs to be tested, and the conversations to test that will happen in another arena, and so it's very hard for us to go out at the stage and say, hey, we expect to get X from so-and-so and X from so-and-so and or whatever. So we have been challenged by that particular question.
Yeah, that because I think through the hearings process I'll flag right now, I can anticipate lots of questions I'll be asking people because I think it's a very important topic.
Okay, Councillor Forsyth.
Just around options 1 and 2, look, given, I understand Councillor Mallett's request around, well, numbers, you know, what do the numbers mean? Put some more context around that. And I'm just thinking about a little bit more context, given the economic climate that we're in now and the interest rates at an all-time low. I wonder if that's worthwhile including in the options 1 and 2, just to add some extra context there, that interest rates are the lowest that they've ever been. I'm not suggesting that you say it's a good time to borrow, but what interest rates could mean, what that debt could mean if we did something now, as opposed to, I mean, who knows what can happen in sort of 3, 4, 5 years' time. But I'm just wondering if there's a little bit of extra context around there that might be helpful.
Well, I think the extra context around impact that this might have on our debt to revenue position is probably appropriate. My concern is that the more we get into the detailed sort of financial, you know, talking about interest rates, we're kind of moving away from what we're actually wanting to find out from the public, which is which of these 3 options do they prefer. And I appreciate that that's, you know, may give some extra context, but I think it would confuse more than help, to be frank.
So you're saying that adding numbers in here is taking away from the point of the document?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I think the point that I've heard is that we want people to understand what the impact is. At this stage, we can reasonably confidently talk to the impact that if council had to fund the whole thing and borrow for everything, then this would be the impact on our debt position, our debt to revenue ratio. I don't think we need to explain interest rates and sort of how we, you know, I guess the detailed workings behind that. I think that level of detail would be too much in this document. Yeah,
I'm not suggesting that you put in that detail. All I'm suggesting is that there's a statement with some context around the current economic climate. And I mean, it's my view that this is a one-off, it's an extraordinary expense, but it is infrastructure, for goodness sake. Nothing's been done on it since 2001, so that's okay. Where I'm coming from. Yeah.
Just one other aspect is the context behind the interest rates in this respect is more around our long-term interest rates as a council through our swap portfolio. So effectively we've fixed out at the moment, David, 70%, 80% of our interest rates are swapped out anywhere up to 10 years. So when it comes to new borrowings and so forth, and in that it's a blended rate rather than specifically allocating a lower rate to this. It blends across all our rates. So that gets really quite confusing trying to explain that to the reader as well. So we'll consider that, but it's trying to balance up how council operates its finances and not making it too complex as well.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So can I just make a general comment around the implications of changes to this document? So the document is presented for approval, but I understand there's some of that feedback we're receiving. To include the sort of 3 graphs which explain kind of the impact of each option on debt to revenue, probably push this out to beyond being a 4-page document. Our options are really a 4-page or an 8-page document, so we're back to having a much larger document, which then can't be a rat around city news. So there are flow-on implications to that. I appreciate that we want to get the document right and give the information to the public that's required. I'm just sort of flagging that there'll be implications on timeframes in terms of when we can actually start the consultation process if we make significant changes to the design of this document.
Point of order,
Sorry, can I just-
point of order,
yes.
Your Worship.
Yes.
I think that that's a really unfortunate insertion by a staff member in the discussion. The important point is whether we want to include certain things or not, and then how it's best done is left to staff, not to try and insert that in the debate as something that would have the effect of stifling debate. I don't necessarily agree with everything Councillor Forsyth was talking about, or the others, but we can't be told it won't fit in or it's going to have all of these delay implications at this point on something as important as this. And I really object to any staff member putting that before us in this situation.
Okay.
Plus, as someone who does a lot of layout, I think it's absolute rubbish. You can fit quite a lot more in a space like this.
Okay, so it's not a point of order, but there's a couple of aspects to this, isn't there? It's staff's jobs to tell us what the consequences are, so he's done that, and that's appropriate. And quite frankly, Councillor McPherson, I don't think it affects the debate or people's views. Staff's job is to say, well, if you want to do A, B, C and D, these are the consequences our end. And what he said, I had no problem with what he said. Councillor Pascoe?
Sorry, could I just...
sorry, you're still going?
Yeah, just
sorry.
one comment about the design and layout. I think it would be really helpful to have a photo of something, a photo either of the existing or a photo of something that could be just, I think too many words isn't really going to grab and inspire and engage.
So I think the feedback at the briefing was, the one at the briefing had little photos, and the feedback was they didn't add anything to it. So you can see where staff go then, some want photos, some don't want photos. But so staff have acted on the feedback from the briefing, which was take out the small, they were little photos.
Well, even some sort of background picture of Founders Theatre or something.
Now, Councillor Pascoe, I have you next.
Thank you, Worship. Part of the picture that's missing for me, not in the brochure part, but in the report, are the questions that you're going to ask in the survey. Yeah. And whilst I would suspect that the first question will be, do you support option A, 1, 2 or 3, and that will be relatively standard. And I think when you get to option 2, there are quite a number of variations that submitters may have, because the first I heard was that maybe if we rebuilt a new theatre, we might build it on the same site as where the Founders Theatre is now, and that might be that may have a much more economic cost to build than perhaps the other site that's been talked about today, the Arts Post site. So I just wonder if this is likely to come back to us again, and I'm not saying that we should determine what the question should be, but it would be very useful to know what questions are going to be asked so that we have an idea as to how we might target the submitters to give us the information that's necessary for us to move on with our decision making later in the year.
Certainly, so the survey questionnaire is still being worked through with the company. I can give you a kind of an overview of what those questions are. So essentially, you're correct, we ask which of those 3 preferred options, which of those options people prefer, 1, 2 or 3. We we have a follow-up question for anyone that chooses the refurbishment option, option 1. We want to test whether they would prefer the new build option if council's investment was capped. So we do ask them a question that if council's investment was capped at $30 million, would you then favour the new build option over the refurbishment? So trying to tease that funding question out. We also ask a number of questions to demographic questions, whether they're a ratepayer or not, so that we can essentially analyse the results on some of those variables. We also have a couple of open-ended questions at the end of the survey to tease out anything else that's not sort of covered in those fixed option questions.
So the teasing out question is really around option 1 rather than option 2, or would you have similar questions for option 2 as you have in terms of what might be a cap on a new theatre build, or whether if they don't favour option 1 and favour option 2, what they would favour as the fit for option 2?
No, we haven't included that. I guess the brief for the survey was to get the public's view on whether they prefer option 1, 2 or 3. So if someone says, I prefer option 2, which is to build a new theatre for $50 million, then there isn't really a follow-up question to say, there's no sort of further information required essentially. Whereas if they choose the refurbishment option for $20 million, what we're trying to elicit is there a tipping point at which they would then favour the new build over the refurbishment.
So do you think a question for option 2 would be where they might favour a new theatre, given Councillor McPherson's earlier query around parking, for example, and how parking might, in some sites, significantly add to the cost if there's not
we haven't included it at this stage. I don't think there would be an issue with including that. The reason we haven't is that we were trying to keep the survey as short as possible to get the answer in the resolution, which was preferred option 1, 2 or 3. If the council determined when the options were presented, when the submissions were presented back, if they determined in July that we wanted to pursue the build a new theatre option, then there would be a further process to get public feedback on where, things like where, those kinds of things.
Okay. Right. No other questions. I just have... Oh, sorry. Councillor King.
Brent, you're talking about... Sorry, Sean. You're talking about the brief for this document being what would the public prefer?
Yes.
When you go into a shop and you choose A, B or C, part of your choice process is price.
Yes.
Where's the effect on the ratepayer for option 1 or 2 or 3? Where's the... On the document that we're going out to ask them what they would like, where does it say what it costs?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is a reasonably similar point to that which we've been discussing.
But isn't it really important?
Yeah, absolutely. So we felt that the best way to summarise those options for the public was that 50 million versus 20 million and talk in those numbers, that people would kind of inherently get that. We don't have enough information at this stage to be able to say what the impact on rates would be, so the impact on them personally.
So
well, what is the impact going to be?
So, Councillor King, these are the questions that Councillor Mallett raised and Councillor McPherson's raised, and I think other speakers have kind of agreed with, that there seems to be the impact or the consequences missing, which the staff have picked up on. So those are the same questions that have been asked.
So could I ask the CE what the cost will be?
Yep.
What the difference will be on people's rates? Or the overall rates?
So the premise,
Last report.
Councillor King, name for a sec there. The premise, Councillor King, is the same premise as we adopted for the 10-year plan, is that we hold rates constant at 3.8% increase, and what changes when the debt to revenue ratio hits our target, whether it goes out as at 2021, 2022, 2023 and so forth. So it doesn't directly impact on the ratepayer here and now. It has an intergenerational impact over the years as we pay the debt off over a longer period of time.
So we can spend $50 million and stay within our rates take of 3.8, and we can stay within a debt to revenue ratio.
No, that's what's missing from here, Councillor King, is we do not include here, and it's been requested by Her Worship, and then Councillor Mallett also mentioned it, we do not reflect that impact. And that you're right, we need to include in here that if we spend $50 million, we do not hit our debt to revenue target until 2023 or 2 or 3. So it's a year or two after the current one.
2023, it was in our...
Yeah, that's right,
It was
2023.
all set out in the 31 March report.
Yep, so
It's all in there.
that information's missing, and it's been requested by other elected
It might be in there, Madam Chair, but what I'm saying is that this document's going out to the public without telling the public what the choice
That's the point,
is.
Councillor King. Those are the same questions that Councillor Mallett raised. Where is that in the document? So you're just repeating what's already been raised by a number of councillors, that the view seems to be, and this has now been reinforced by Councillor King, his view, that's missing in the document.
Am I not allowed to ask these questions?
No, I'm just trying to be helpful, Councillor King. If they've been asked...
You're not
and-
being helpful.
If they've been asked and answered...
Can I go on with my questioning?
Let me finish. If they have been asked and answered, you don't need to ask them again, but certainly ask questions that haven't been. That's helpful for all of us.
I was leading through, Madam Chair, to asking the CE what the effect would be, because I'm sure somebody in this room has done their homework and does know what the effect is, and that's where I'm heading, and I'm asking that question.
And that's the question he's just answered for you.
So what is the answer? Has anybody actually worked out what the effect's going to be?
Yep, so it'll
For
be,
spending 50
it
million.
will be a deteriorating impact on debt to revenue ratio by a couple of years.
A couple of years.
Yep, so rather than hitting it in 2021, we'll hit it in 2023. And that's not included in this report, and we've agreed it needs to be.
Thank you. How are the earthquake engineer testing, the seismic testing coming on? Sean?
Sorry?
How is the seismic testing coming on?
Oh, look, it's underway, and as I said earlier on, I'd spoken to the engineers, and they're doing the work now. They're doing the desk work, and that'll determine the nature of the invasive testing that they do in the building itself, which may start the week after next.
On site next week?
The week after next.
Do you still stand by your 55% seismic desktop report level that you told us about at the last meeting?
The 55% report was done some years ago, and no, we don't stand by that, and that's the reason we're doing this work, to check it, because we had that subsequent report done by Dunning Thornton that raised the alert.
So when you assured us last week it was 55%, and it's recorded in our minutes, that wasn't the latest report, it was another report after that one?
I can't recall assuring you of 55%.
In terms of the building compliance
you would-
2007 assessment,
yes,
indicated the building was
absolutely.
55% compliant.
Absolutely,
Which is to the
but-
question when we asked what it was compliant to, we
Yeah.
were told 55%.
That's that report, but I also forwarded a report from Dunning Thornton which, alerted us to the fact that it may be 33% or maybe less, and hence the work that we're doing.
So when did that report come, when was that report circulated to say it was 33% or less?
When we did the, was it 31 March, I think, when we had all the papers with all the reports in them? I think it was 31 March, or was it the month
The
before?
last council
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay, I'm just trying to get my head around the two reports, the option 1 and option 2. Well, first thing I'd like to ask is, where has this locating the new theatre near the Waikato River, and Councillor Pascoe was alluding to the Arts Post site earlier, when has this been discussed with council?
When we reported last month to you, we raised the fact that following the notice of closure of Founders Theatre, that a lot of conversation across interested parties in the community outside of council were raising the question, well, if you have to spend a lot of money to do a refurbishment, should you look at building something new? And if you look at building something new, should you look at alternative locations at the same time? So the whole premise of these options has actually come out of conversations that have taken place in the community, and we're responding to that and taking that further through this engagement process.
So what are the options? Because as a councillor, I haven't been told what the options are.
Well, we haven't explored the options ourselves. At the moment, we're trying to explore whether or not council wants to consider a refurbishment option, a rebuild option, or a no action option. So we have not done any work at all with regards alternative locations or specific sites, but I do know that there's a lot of conversations by people being had out there, but not by us.
So with your $50 million build, how many people do you expect that will sit?
Around 1,200, which is the current carrying capacity.
I'm going back and forwards between option 1 and option 2. You assured us at the last meeting that's $20 million, and
That was our assessment, yes.
you assured us it would not go, your staff member and yourself sitting next to him, and you didn't correct him, assured us it wouldn't go over 20.400.
We don't foresee it going above that at this stage. As I said, I would have said, I'm sure, the outcome, and it relates to the question earlier on, the outcome of the Dunning-Thornton report, if it is much worse than anticipated, yes, that may change, but...
So you've changed your position from last
I don't think I've
meeting.
changed my position at all, Councillor King.
So you are still standing by the 20 million?
I'm, in the vein of which I've explained it, yes.
So if it's $20 million and you're quite sure it's $20 million and your staff are quite sure it's $20 million and you've assured us it's $20 million, can you explain to me the difference between a $50 million new build theatre and a $20 million rebuild? Because all the points on either are the same. I'm struggling to see what the benefit is of spending $30 million extra dollars when both theatres are going to seat 1,250 people. Both theatres have got the new stage house with more room, new dressing rooms, new seating, a total refit of the existing Founders for $20 million, and yet for $50 million you're giving us the same thing. Why would we even consider? And where is the difference? Where's the benefit for a $30 million build, and why are we going to the public to ask them whether we spend $50 million when there is actually no gain apart from location?
Look, as I said earlier on, we're responding to a lot of feedback that we've had and what we've understood, and a lot of people have been begging the question, if you're going to spend 20, why not spend 50? I'm not espousing a particular view one way or the other here, but what we are wanting to do is to test it. If people are saying that it's something that should be considered, then we're actually going out and asking the question. We are not putting a pitch here for a $50 million build, necessarily over and above a $20 million build. We are going out and simply asking people, what do you think? But we are wanting to get a broad set of feedback rather than from specific interested parties or individuals.
I'm asking about your report. Who wrote this report? Whose name's on this report?
The report?
Yes.
So I organised the report.
So can you tell me what the benefit is between option 1 and option 2?
I can pick that up, Councillor King. And I was working on this yesterday, making sure the report reflected that. The key difference between a new build and a refurbishment of the existing site is if we refurbish the existing site, we're restrained within the existing floor plan of the existing building. So whilst we get the opportunity to effectively make it as new as possible, we're still restricted by the outside walls and the load-bearing walls, and with that potentially some suboptimal outcomes as we try to meet today's demands of a theatre operation. The new build gives us the opportunity not to have those restrictions, and what we've included is a bullet point, which is the very last bullet point under option 2, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th bullet point, which talks to that point. So it's really about the ability to future-proof and meet, and a degree of flexibility, to be fair, in terms of layout and design.
So for $30 million, you're getting more flexibility. Is that why?
That was one of the...
Is that the benefit?
And the points it says there, we're not restricted by the floor plan, yes.
But we don't propose sitting any more people?
My understanding is, no, it's not my understanding. I know it will be a same size capacity. Same capacity, Councillor.
Thank you.
Can I just check a question in relation to the Arts Forum? Have they been provided with the 31 March report?
Yes, Your Worship, they were.
Okay, so they have full information as much as council have got to enable them to have a discussion at their next meeting?
Yes, I understand they do have the report.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was my only concern, that they had as much information as we had. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay.
Just one tiny one, and that's on option 2. I think the way it's written, maybe Rob's sort of picked this up a bit too. It's written almost as if it will be on another site. I can't see anywhere in there where it says the rebuild could be on the existing site. Is that that's not clear? Yeah, that's not clear in there, is it?
And
So
yet
what-
that was one of the options initially, is
Yeah.
that if they bolted over, they'd rebuild on the same site.
So
Okay, so yeah, I think that's right. I think I mean, you know, we're sort of straying into comments, but yeah, I don't think the options have been articulated sufficiently clearly what the difference is.
It was to be as simple as saying that a new theatre could be built on the existing site or an alternative site.
Yes, I think delving down into the details. Good. Okay, so look, there's no other questions. So what I'm hearing here is there's feedback and there's still more work to be done. So could I just perhaps, councillors, if we look at the recommendation, I just want to check, are there any further questions on the actual public engagement parts of this report and the process that's intended to be followed? So if there aren't, I'm going to sort of separate that bit out.
Sorry, I do have, Your Worship, one question in relation to option 3, first bullet point.
All right, yes.
It says, although some events could be held elsewhere in the city, there is no comparable venue. I'm not sure how much of a guide that gives, because there are quite a number of events booked into that have been booked into Founders that have been shifted elsewhere. I don't know whether it's 10% or 90%. I don't have a clear picture of that. I went to an event on the weekend which had about the numbers that would fit into Founders. I don't know whether it was originally booked there, the Proclaimers, or what.
Yes, it was.
There's no sense of that. Are we, if we completely demolish, are we giving away the opportunity for just a handful of events, or are we giving away much more?
Look, probably much more, but I get what you're saying in terms of maybe we haven't been clear enough on that. There are a lot of alternative spaces in Hamilton for some events, but there's also not for a lot of others. So, for example, you know, a Hamilton operatic type performance and other performances where they need that sort of seating capacity with the Cinema Arts Theatre. We have had a number of shows that have either cancelled fully or have relocated to Tauranga or Rotorua as a result of the change. So there will be loss, but maybe we haven't been clear
Just
enough
a sense
on
of that in there without being too specific.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so just looking at page 13, A is easy, report B received.
Done.
Right, so B, I was going to suggest this.
Hang on.
Oh, right, okay. I was going to suggest this for B. We have a strategy and policy committee meeting next week. We could, between now and then, the staff can pick up the feedback. Can I just test? I don't think, Sean Hickey, I don't think there is an issue about page numbers.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be confined to the 4 pages, but I think we hear that if it's not 4, it has to be 8. It can't be 5 or 6, but it could be.
So I guess the issue with the page numbers, Your Worship, is that if it isn't 4 pages, so the design of this is to go around the outside of the city news.
Wrap, yeah.
If it becomes 8 pages, then obviously that can't happen, and so we would miss the city news distribution deadlines, essentially. The way that the
It's just not
Take
true.
over,
That's just not true.
No,
I don't.
use the city.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dispute about that.
so the way that the documents are printed, that's the advice that we have.
When does it have to go to the printers?
So if it's 4 pages, we can get it approved by the 3rd which would be the last date that we could get it approved, and it remained 4 pages, then we could essentially meet, broadly speaking, our timeframes. The consultation period would have to start slightly later, being the 4th of May, and run to the 8th of June.
Right, and if it's 8 pages, you can't meet that deadline.
Correct.
Why is that?
Because it can't be provided as a wrap to the City News. is
No,
my
but if it's not a
understanding.
wrap, if it's printed and folded and inserted, why can't it meet that deadline?
The way that the inserts are inserted into the City News is such that they need to be printed earlier in order to be inserted. Process for inserting versus wrapping is different, and so the deadlines we've been given for insertion are much earlier than the deadlines for wrapping.
Right, okay. So, are you waving your hand at me, Councillor
No, I've got a
Gallagher?
question around the consultation. Finish
Right.
this and I'm coming back to that.
Okay. Okay. So, so if it is, it has to go in the City News, or can the City News be delayed a week so that it meets the City News?
Yeah, I'm just going to ask Lee if she can kind of give us some advice here.
No, I mean, I'm trying to break down the barriers here and be solutions focused.
It's our paper.
So Sean is absolutely correct when he says that we've missed a print deadline to allow us to do an 8-page, and we're on a print deadline for a 4-page wrap. If we were to extend City News by a week, we'd need to investigate that, because it will come down to print slot availability with the printers that actually is up in Auckland to allow us to do the print run plus an 8-page print run for insert. The way that they do it off the printers that they've got is they print the whole lot at the same time and they insert it at the same period. So they can't print separately, fold and insert, they have to print in one go.
Yeah, get that. So as a council that has a deep pocket
Yeah.
and is an important
Eureka.
client,
Come on.
that might be a
This is
matter of
crazy.
negotiation.
I just-
Curious, but you know.
Your worship, I'm feeling that there's a great desire to get the document right.
I
is
think
the key-
that's
key
number
point that's
one.
come around the
The
table.
document
$50
right
million.
is number one.
Yeah.
We're also being given a lot of technical information that is only half the story about production.
Yeah. So I'm not going to even enter into that fray because I know nothing in that respect.
Just think, we've all had to do it for our.
No,
Your
Gary,
review's
no.
coming up this afternoon and you know nothing. Bad.
Okay, Gary. Yeah. All right, so,
I give up.
so yes, so we all agree the document has to be right. The feedback I'm hearing, just, I think I've got this right, is some content, more context is needed, some more differentiation between the options is required, financial consequences and impacts is required.
It's a struggle, your worship. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I guess when I'm saying context, that relates to the issues and just more explanation, I think, is what people are saying. Look, design is probably, with respect to Councillor O'Leary, probably too late. So I think we can accept that. But, you know, they can work in that design, perhaps. And, yeah. Sorry, did you want to say something?
I was suggesting the struggle of trying to balance up everyone's views around the table, and as whether or not we've got the hard points that we've heard in terms of the inclusion of the financial impacts, making sure it reflects the additional costs of parking and so forth, so we've made notes of those, as whether we can work offline with a couple of councillors just to make sure that we at least get some representation into the design as much as we can change it. I know it's quite limited, so that when we bring it back, it does reflect the flavour that council is looking for.
Yes, no, I think that's a good idea. So this is what I'm going to suggest in relation to B, that the Founders Theatre engagement document is further improved with the assistance of some councillors, and if you might want to put your hands up, and reported back to the Strategy and Policy Committee on the 2nd of May. Is that your committee date meeting?
Yes.
And by doing that, if we resolve that, we are delegating to that committee to sign it off. And
3rd of May.
is it the
3rd of May, sorry.
3rd of May. So if that was the case, Sean Hickey, what does the engagement period would then commence when?
So assuming it was signed off at that Strategy and Policy Committee, then the engagement process could start the following day, the 4th of May,
Right?
and would run until the 8th of June.
Okay.
So we would still meet the, one moment please.
4th of June.
Sorry, I've been advised that it should be the 6th of May.
Oh, 6th of May and 8th of June.
10th, so then it would be the 10th of June.
Okay, so that covers the 4 weeks. Well,
Correct.
the 4 weeks actually,
That's
it's
5 weeks.
5 weeks, that's 5 weeks.
So the 10th of June relates to when the public notices go into the newspaper, so it needs to be from then. So following the council meeting, following approval, we then need to confirm the public notices and get those in, and then the 4 weeks from there, is my understanding. And it's the advice we've had is that it kicks in then.
Sorry, so it would commence on the 6th of May, which is a Friday? Or is it the 10th of May, which is a Tuesday? What's the date?
6th of May.
6th of May, which is a Friday. What's this about public notices?
That, so public notices are part of the engagement process, and that we need to have 4 weeks following the publishing of the public notices
Right.
before the engagement
And we can
period closes.
public notices are simply notifying the public something started, and that you're talking about that being in print. Is that a requirement that it must be in print?
I believe so, yes.
In the significance policy, I think it does link back to that part of the law, but that's in a daily newspaper and you can book spaces
You put it in
and
the
change
at a
the
time.
text just the day before.
Yep, you can.
Easy.
Yes, Your Worship, to confirm it needs to be in a printed public paper.
Okay, so
And so we look at the Waikato Times, which would be the day following.
could go on the 6th then, the same day.
It could do. The only issue is we need to make sure that council approves it because we can't withdraw it overnight.
Yeah,
So
Yep.
we need to make sure that we're certain that we're going ahead. And Lachlan City Solicitor has advised that we then should allow a month and 2 days to make sure that that's very clear, that we've met that requirement.
okay, so if it goes in on the 6th, then it's got to be a month and 2 days. Okay, right.
Excuse me,
All right, good, yes?
what's the rush here?
No,
Why are we bending all the rules and
Oh, well, okay.
and pushing this ahead? I've never seen this happen in this triennium before. Why are we go? Normally we would go back, this would be addressed at the next meeting. The agenda's already up, the S&P meeting, we were given it today. So this would be a late item into the S&P. We're waiting for a seismic report to come back, which may totally mean this document and this $116,000 consultation is of no use anyway. Why are we pushing ahead so hard and so fast? Why don't we just slow this down and wait, go through the proper process like we do with any other matters?
So I'm going to move a motion. Councillor King, if you don't agree with that, you're most welcome to put an amendment after I've moved the motion. Absolutely fine about that. And then you can speak about those issues.
I think it's a legitimate question to ask someone why it needs to be completed by the 10th of June
Oh,
now.
yes, I see, yeah. I didn't take that as,
Well,
that was the
one-
question. So if that is the question,
So, sorry, can I just clarify, is the question, why does the consultation period need to finish on the 10th of June?
Why is the rush? What I'm saying is, this is the biggest decision this council's made. Why don't we let it go through the normal, proper process of this going away as an unrushed document, staff working on it, coming back,
That's
getting
what
our
I'm saying.
feedback
That's what
again.
I'm
Once
saying.
we're happy with it, then we propose, at that stage, we go to public consultation.
as I said, councillor King, if that's your view, the staff have gone away and
It's not my
done.
view. I'm asking the question of why are we rushing? What's the rush?
So just in response from this report, based on the resolution that this council made on the 31st of March, the staff have gone off and responded to it. And this is their response. We can decide whatever we want in respect of your issues today. The staff are simply responding to our resolution of the 31st of March and delivered what we asked them to do. If council now has a different view about that, they can make that decision today.
So what you're proposing is booking space tens of thousands of dollars worth of media space on a document that's going to come back, and if we once again don't like what we're getting and once again ask for it to go back, we're losing that money is gone, flushed down the toilet. And we're going to sit back around this table and feel pressured to have to accept whatever comes through next time, because if we don't, all that money that we're spending in advance is gone. What happens if the document comes back next time at the next meeting and we still don't like it?
So that's what I'm saying, Councillor King. If you want to move an amendment to the motion and debate those out, you're most welcome to do so.
I'm questioning your responsibility with ratepayers' money.
I'm comfortable with the motion I'm going to put. If you don't agree with it, we have a process, and that process is called an amendment. And that's your option to put your alternate view and see what everyone else thinks. Now, Councillor Gallagher, you had your...
Yeah, just on the consultation process, just a recommendation where you talk about statement of proposal, garden place, libraries, community houses, MP's office. I think you just widen that a bit, just a bit of initiative that, I don't mean initiative in a rude sense, but I mean, like obviously Western Community Centre, you've got some significant public spaces where that they should go. The other thing which I was asking, I raised this before, given that we are correctly distributing an engagement document to our Tamahiris of this world, those immediate communities surrounding, just across our technical city boundary, what plans do we have to formally brief Waipa, Waikato, possibly the regional council, in that I would certainly be, as we move through the process, be wanting to engage with them very obviously, because obviously this is a regional facility. It is definitely a sub-regional, central Waikato facility, but probably regional. And I'm just trying to work out, and this is more at this stage as a courtesy, so that they actually are invited to make sort of, dare I say it, informed comment. I think they'll know that we may be coming back to talk to them around their residents neighbouring our city, perhaps helping to fund it.
Yep, so our chief executive has spoken to, sorry, you can answer it.
So I've preliminary briefed the chief executives of Waipa and Waikato to the extent of where this council is in terms of its decision making regarding founders. I've explained the process we're going through, and once this document's signed off, I intend to provide a copy to them directly so they understand the nature of what's in that agreement. I've talked about it to that extent as well, and any direction the council provides me in terms of other conversations, councillor, I'll continue with those as well.
Well, even like in that, an indication of our strong willingness to engage, with them to give them a briefing or whatever. Or
yeah, they're very aware of our position on various points, but absolutely.
Okay, so as long as what I would ask then is the descriptive minutes, just note your comments.
Yep.
Okay, so does the board work?
So, yeah, what's the...
Right. So,
I don't know what the motion is.
okay, so I'm happy to move that.
I'd like to move an amendment
Yep.
to point D only, Your Worship.
Right, and that is?
The amendment is the engagement period shall be from the date of final approval by council of this document until 14 July 2016, being 2 weeks before the report back to council, and then a comma, I suppose, subject to the minimum 4 weeks consultation being included.
You might need to explain that.
Sorry?
Let's wait till it's written up and then
Yep, sure.
let's explain that.
But I've written on a blotter here if anyone wants it.
6 May, 10 June.
It's changed to D, isn't it?
D only here.
just repeat what you said, Councillor McPherson, so they can type it?
Sorry,
Just want to read it out, speak it out again so they can type it.
I think I've got it, so just bear with us whilst we
Right.
type it up for you.
Sorry, Your Worship, there may be some clarification needed around the word some. Is this 2 or is it 5 or is it 12? And I think that should be specified, and I'd be happy to nominate Councillor McPherson because of experience in the printing business, and Councillor King, who's had some tough questions around the report, and maybe there's a third councillor that's prepared to view that. But I think it needs more than just the word some councils.
So who would like to be involved in that small group? Councillor McPherson, are you interested?
I wouldn't say interested is the right word, Your Worship, willing.
Willing, okay, you're willing, yes? You want to, yeah? Who else wants to?
Shouldn't the document be circulated to all members as we do?
It will be, Councillor King, but I think what we're trying to
For
do
feedback.
here, is take 13 people and reduce them down to 3 or 4 that can work closely with staff, making sure that from an elected member point of view, it ticks the boxes, and then it will be able to be circulated. Otherwise, it could be all of us sitting here on Monday, going through it line by line. No, we quite often work it like that. I don't know, my experiences work pretty well. We've had a briefing on it already, and we gave a lot of feedback at the briefing, which I think was useful. So we might name the councillors, perhaps? Yeah, okay. Is that the wording, Councillor McPherson?
It's not quite what I've got down there.
So do you want to make sure it's
I
worded
have
how
given
you
them a
want it?
copy of it, Your Worship, but I think it was partway through their
Oh,
typing.
okay, they're typing that.
Whilst the democracy team are typing, to be fair, I think it's going to take us more than 2 weeks to correlate all the feedback and submissions. That's one of the challenges. I know you're going to say that we're great at the Council McPherson, that we're going to get this process lickety split. First time we use that phrase in council, but I don't think we'll be able to do it in the 2 weeks.
And you couldn't allocate the resources of priority for a short 1 week period? It's only 1 week you've got, because then you've got to get the report out. I was considering it could be a couple of days less.
There needs to be hearings. Did your consultation period include hearings?
There's going to be hearings in there as well.
Well, no, there's been no suggestion of that. Sorry, Your Worship, I'm not suggesting any, apart from the dates being a bit differently handled, I'm not suggesting anything different in process. And given the fact that there's a 1,600 person public survey being done by a company, I'm expecting, from having seen other stuff done for council, that comes back with analysis to some extent already done, certainly statistical analysis.
I think you're right with the survey.
What I'm going to suggest is, because it might be just a resolution about joining up our words here, so what I'm going to suggest is a 5-minute break while we just sort out some words and get some stuff sorted. Thanks.
Sean.